I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
The notorious Viper Island.
Dabbing on them haters.
Hey folks, it's time to gear up and get right into this special report with brand new information from recent interviews by the G.I. Joe Classified team at Hasbro. And before we get started, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already to show your support for the show. In today's special report, we'll share with you brand new details about the following topics: the future design of all G.I. Joe packaging, when the transition will happen to plastic packaging, details about the new Arctic Bat, Scrap Iron and his humongous missile-firing drone, details about the new Night Force subline, then secret details about what the Night Force storyline will be, and we'll reveal some clues about who the brand new G.I. Joe Night Force character is going to be, an update from the Joe team on the O-Ring line, what the Joe team had to say about the quality control issues with Classified, their future plans for Classified, details about new upcoming figures, plus a lot more. Folks, it's a big update, so you'll want to stick with us until the end. We'll save you a few hours of your day and share with you only the important details that you need to know. First, we'll share with you what they had to say about the vintage look versus modern updates. In terms of changing the look of Classified from futuristic to vintage, Lenny said, "It was easier than we thought it was going to be. To our detriment, we read the comments entirely too much, I think. At the same time, that's part of research. As a designer, beyond being a G.I. Joe head, you have to take in that criticism and those comments and what people are reacting to. With that in mind, you have to take that in, try to digest it, and try to iterate it into a design that fits for the brand and the brand's needs. You gotta pay attention to what's being said. So we started moving more towards realism, but we are trying to keep the elements that will push it into the future. A lot of times, G.I. Joe characters are archetypal, like Rakondo. He's the archetype of a jungle guy. So there's going to be a character like that. It's kind of like the rule of cool. Characters like Rakondo and Outback look like what they do. The Range Vipers look like bad guys. With kids, what we're finding is that if it looks like it serves the purpose of what they do with their play space, then you're probably in a good spot. It's all about taking what worked back then and the elements that make a character and reiterating them for a new audience. How do you do that so it doesn't look dated? Tony from the G.I. Joe team added, "It takes about 15 months for any figure to go from design on paper until it's on shelves. With the reactionary time it takes to make a figure, you've got comments coming in about figures you made a year ago. You can be reactionary and fit that in and look to see where you can improve here and there. Maybe you can make some adjustments once you read and hear those comments." Emily added, "Instead of cutting planned figures, what we did was combine a bunch of different waves of figures, which resulted in having much larger waves. In terms of updates, Lenny had the following to say. On Tunnel Rat, we removed the bell bottoms, gave him knee pads because of what he does, and then we gave him more pouches. The pouches were inspired by the G.I. Joe Renegades version of Tunnel Rat." Lenny also added that he almost decided to give Tunnel Rat the suspenders from the Renegades version, but ultimately he knew that we needed a classic version of Tunnel Rat. As for the design of the Range Vipers, Lenny mentions why the Range Viper was designed the way that he was. It's heavily based on military-specific designs, which is what Lenny means whenever he refers to mil-spec. He said, "The original Range Viper design had bandoliers wrapped around his body. I started off drawing it to see if it made sense, and it didn't. The bullet bandoliers wrapped around his upper arms, and that would have impeded articulation. Then it dawned on me. Just make the most mil-spec looking, tough-looking Range Viper troopers that you can do, with pouches and all kinds of stuff." Lenny also mentioned that the Range Viper vest will be reused for future figures. Making a mil-spec vest like Range Vipers, we can probably use that again in other characters with some new deco. So there you have it. Keep an eye out for the Range Vipers vest to appear on other characters, likely larger bodied figures with the size and build of Outback. Tony added, "Reuse is such a toy legacy. I mean, look at the original 3 3/4 inch O-ring line. You saw a lot of reuse there, right? But our business was built on figure part reuse. That's across company, that's across toy lines, that's across everything." Lenny also pointed out that there is a hole in the back of Range Viper's head. A Neuralink tube can be attached between the head and the PSI canister on his backpack. At the top of his backpack, this black tube can be inserted into the back of Range Viper's head. Lenny said, "We can put all sorts of gizmos on the back of his backpack backpack to insinuate that he's making calculations out on the range. And to that point, here at the bottom of the backpack, there is a small digital screen for range scoping, along with 2 keypads. On the back of his belt, there's also a holder for his sai. Lenny said that this belt will be reused again later on with different characters and different weapons. Lenny said that he tried to make the Range Viper's skull helmet look more realistic than the original 80s figure. It is based on the Outback body. It was fun to reimagine him in a mil-spec way, with fantasy elements like the brain case on his helmet, and the neurotransmitters connected to his backpack. It was fun to get into the anatomy of the skull and make it more realistic. As a kid, I always loved the Range Viper figure but thought the skull was a little off, so I wanted to make the skull more realistic. I imagined that someone in the military wearing a mask like that would have a realistic looking skull, not a cartoony skull. In terms of redecos or repaints, Lenny said, "We do what I call Frankenstein builds. I'll make a couple new parts, then use some existing parts, then use some deco, then mix and match some of the secondaries on the parts to make them feel refreshed. Then let's move on to Shadow Tracker." Lenny said he was a combination of resources and modernization. He had a really cool clear mask, and I thought that was kinda sci-fi. At the same time, the way he reads is like poacher who's always in the field. So why wouldn't he fashion himself a mask out of the bones of an animal that he's hunting, or wear some of the animals as trophies? He is a trophy hunter, so why wouldn't he wear them on him? You can still put the clear mask on and give him that classic look, but I just thought a skull mask would be badass to tell you the truth. It's a jaguar skull. Lenny said that he chose a jaguar skull because jaguars are supposed to be the shadows of the jungle. The finished product of the jaguar mask won't be as bright as the digital renders portrayed them to be. They're trying to make the skull mask look even more realistic and bone-like. Some of the other parts of Shadow Tracker were resource-driven, as it's an exclusive. This means pulling from other parts and pieces to make a character look a certain way. Lenny said, "If you're gonna do it, make it so the figure looks like it was purposely done that way, figuring out what you can do with what you already have and trying to make something look refreshed and new." Emily added, "G.I. Joe is a brand that constantly reinvents itself to what is modern and what's in. We are at our core a fashion brand, which I always love." Lenny said, "I think any good action figure design can tell the story through its design and with the help of its packaging. With Tiger Force, we're telling this jungle battle story. Even with Cobra Island, we were telling this garrison type of story. Everyone, garrison up. Cobra is coming. Everybody look out." With the Night Force packaging, you can tell that we're trying to tell a story with the backgrounds and trying to utilize the real estate of the packaging to help with telling that narrative. I'm not going to say what that is right now. I want people to put the pieces together. You'll find out as you get the figures. I was playing with the idea that Night Force is called into action up against something that is nebulous, and the Joe team doesn't understand the whole situation completely, and it seems like it could be pretty serious or a new threat. So the Joes call in Night Force, and I thought it would be cool to have Night Force a little more local. So pulling in characters from around the world to handle the situation. So kinda playing with the idea of what goes bump in the night with Night Force. Let's take a moment to decode what Lenny said here. When we examine the cover art for Big Ben and the Range Viper, we notice that there are purple crystals both inside the tunnels and in the wilderness. Could these be Energon crystals? Energon is the fuel source that Autobots and Decepticons sought out in Transformers. These crystals are shown on the packaging for a reason. They're part of the storytelling. This situation at hand is toxic and dangerous enough that Big Ben and Night Force are equipped with gas masks. Meanwhile, the Range Vipers, Cobra's wilderness troopers, are also equipped to deal with hazardous situations like this one. We already know from internal Walmart listings that the zombie Vipers are part of this Walmart exclusive line. What if the Cobra soldiers who turn into the walking undead are actually Toxo Vipers, who are assigned to this mission and become infected? I want to make it clear that the Toxo Vipers are not the most likely option here. We're still expecting either Cobra troopers or Range Vipers themselves to be the ones who turn into zombies. But I think you might agree that this would be a great time to introduce Toxo Vipers into the line, especially with this narrative. Toxo Vipers are usually thrust into battle situations in order to create a foul and unsuitable environment like the one in this narrative. Storyline-wise, nefarious liquids or gases linked to the crystals are causing members of Cobra to turn into zombies, and that's when the Joes realize that this situation will threaten the entire world, so they call in experts from around the globe to help eliminate the threat. As part of Night Force, Big Ben will be joined by Shooter, a Redeco Joe character, likely Falcon, Flint, Roadblock, or Tunnel Rat, as well as a new Joe character who's not currently part of the Classified series. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of our Night Force storyline theory. Stay tuned. In a moment, we're going to tell you our theory on who the surprise Joe character will be. If we are right, G.I. Joe fans are going to be very excited about the direction in which Night Force is headed. But first, let's talk about the Cobra side. In addition to those figures we just mentioned, let's remind you that a new redeco of the Alley Viper will also join this line. Maybe we get a new Alley Viper with gas masks, as I have suggested previously. That fits in perfectly with the narrative that we're decoding from all the clues and from what Lenny has said. The 25th anniversary black and red Alley Viper has a gas mask. Whether the one that we get as part of this line is red and black doesn't matter, but I believe that we will get a new Alley Viper with a gas mask. Possibly even a jungle Alley Viper to better fit with the Shadow Tracker, the Range Viper, and the eerie wilderness theme. And we also know that a brand new Joe character will join the Night Force line. Our prediction? We think it will be a member of the October Guard. Lenny said that the Joes will call in specialists from around the world to battle this new threat. Perhaps we'll see an easy repaint figure become the new character. After all, they could easily turn Beachhead into a redeco Shockwave without much trouble. And while Shockwave would be great, he can be introduced at any point. So while a character like him is still a possibility, we won't rule that out, but we do think that the October Guard is a creative solution which both fits the narrative of Night Force and is also a great option to help out the Joes. As for which October Guard character it might be, perhaps Big Bear. He already looks like a natural fit for Classified. He has a big red beard, the standard Soviet fur cap with ear flaps, and Ushanka. Give him a winter parka, and he looks the part standing next to Big Ben. Or perhaps even Red Star could be the member of October Guard to join Night Force. He's one of the leaders. We'll have to wait and see, but Big Bear is definitely our leading prediction for the new Joe member to join Night Force. Tell us in the comments if you'd be excited to order Big Bear. We would, and we think that this might be where G.I. Joe's Night Force is headed. Back to the G.I. Joe team. When speaking about the Cobra figures in the Walmart exclusive Night Force line, Lenny hinted at the Zombie Vipers. He said, the Cobra troops that have been assigned to that mission will fit the bill of the Night Force Joes who have to go into action. This fits into our Night Force storyline theory that the Zombie Vipers will be Cobra troopers who have turned into the Walking Undead. We're assuming that Zombie Vipers were not created by Cobra on purpose in this narrative, and that Zombie Vipers or troopers are just the result of a terrible accident. Furthermore, all of this talk of storylines and narratives seems almost pointless without the support of a television series airing on a streaming platform of some kind. That would help elevate G.I. Joe past where it is today and frankly where it's been stuck since the 90s. Until that happens, the Classified series will be working overtime to get fans interested in any new narratives. To date, the Joe team has not done a very effective job with telling the stories that they've attempted to tell. Hopefully that changes with Night Force, because there's a great opportunity at hand to push a fresh new narrative. Moving on to Scrap Iron and his anti-armor drone. Lenny said, the 1984 Scrap Iron tripod was cool, but it can't go anywhere. He has to set it up, and I feel like that takes him out of battle a little bit. So putting the treads on, I was sort of inspired by DARPA research stuff, kind of like tank research and the robotics. I feel like a robot drone would probably have some kind of tank tread, and it would be articulated. Lenny mentioned that the drone has headlamps and taillights. There's also a Cobra logo on the back of the drone with vent detailing with lights built into it. Lenny hinted that futuristic characters like Zap and Sci-Fi may appear in Classified, but he cannot confirm at this time. We're definitely going to get into those characters at some point in time. I can't say when because we can't speak to future projects, but if a figure was rad, we'll probably get to it. So yes, we'll do sci-fi stuff, but we'll try to make it look even more real. As for characters, it depends on relevance and timing. We're trying to keep any sci-fi touches in a somewhat real way. Modern sci-fi does that. If you're gonna make a railgun, it's gotta look like it functions. And that's the goal with Classified. We're trying to make the designs look as if they function, even if they look a little aged down. I still want to make them look like they function. Like if it's going to be a railgun, we're going to put fuses on the side to make it look as if it builds up its energy and sends the charges out. As it relates to Hasbro's decisions with the plastic-free packaging and design choices, Emily said, G.I. Joe went in a different direction than a lot of other brands did. Dungeons & Dragons and G.I. Joe did full artwork on the cover. Some of the feedback we've been getting from people is that if you were not already aware of what was in those packages, it's hard to tell what's inside of them. The artwork is beautiful, but if you can't actually see the figure next to the artwork in a meaningful way, it can be difficult to tell what is actually inside. So this is kind of a course correction step to make it easier for people to tell what they're getting inside of the box. This confirms what we've been saying for months, that the design of G.I. Joe's plastic-free packaging caused many collectors to walk away, stop buying, and now Hasbro's decided that the reason why sales have plummeted is because consumers cannot see what's inside the box, and the full artwork is confusing to people. Now, Emily is trying to make the argument that casual consumers walking through a store are not just picking up and buying a random G.I. Joe character because they don't know what's inside the box. And we know this is a bunch of garbage. After all, G.I. Joe fans don't need to see a picture of the bazooka figure to know that this is a package containing a G.I. Joe bazooka figure. Hasbro completely ignores the real reason why fans walked away and stopped collecting the new plastic-free figures. G.I. Joe classified figures are being bought by G.I. Joe collectors who are already familiar with the line. They know the characters. They know what's inside the boxes. They just don't like the presentation of the boxes, the loss of a plastic window to see the figure itself, not just a photo of the figure. Hasbro constantly digs its head into the sand whenever there are problems, and interestingly enough, Emily holds the same position for both Dungeons & Dragons that she does with G.I. Joe. These are the only two brands which use the same format of full artwork on the front of their packages. Something that Emily just mentioned that Hasbro's identified as one of the reasons why sales have dropped. You can figure out who or what is the common denominator in this situation. If Hasbro actually paid attention to its audience and how fans actually feel, then they would have already known why fans were upset about plastic-free packaging from the moment they first announced it. Having a stubborn attitude and refusing to listen to a large portion of their fan base has continually been a concerning issue with this line. The people in charge of the brand have repeatedly made odd choices which have negatively impacted the brand, thereby causing fans to walk away, sales to drop, and in the process hampering the momentum of the classified series. Call it self-sabotage, poor ideas, incompetence, or arrogance. Whatever the case, it might just be a case of having the wrong head chefs in charge of the kitchen. Emily continued, "We were excited when there was an opportunity to try something new, the new style of packaging, and then the announcement came that we are shifting back to windowed packages, so we're all learning together. We're constantly learning and reinventing and trying to figure out what's next." In year 4 of G.I. Joe Classified, Hasbro's reps are telling us that they're still reinventing the line and trying to figure out what's next. Just based on Emily's comments alone, they reportedly have no idea where the line is headed, and apparently we're supposed to listen to her, as she's the marketing and brand manager of G.I. Joe. If someone at Hasbro like Emily is still trying to figure out what's new, then so must be everyone else. That's not great for instilling confidence in your fan base. Neither is replying to most questions with the same canned response repeated over and over, "We cannot speak to future projects," or "We cannot speak to that." Lenny and Emily repeat these words to almost any question they don't want to answer. Unfortunately, the transparency is still lacking in this line. Emily did shed some light on what the new windowed packaging will look like. We are trying to keep as much of the new line look as possible as we move back to windows, while understanding how important it is for collectors to be able to see the figures you're getting. Emily provided some new details on when the switch will happen to plastic windowed packaging, as well as which figures will still have the closed box packaging until the switch happens. She said, "G.I. Joe will be transitioning back to plastic packaging in spring 2024 or so. The figures that came with the His Tank will be all closed box figures. Figures through the rest of the year will all be closed box as well. The plan is to not return to the original style of plastic packaging. We want to keep pushing forward on our classified journey instead of making a circle out of it. So this means that classified fans will have to endure yet another change in the style of packaging and possibly the box dimensions." Emily confirmed that when classified packaging returns to the plastic window in spring 2024, it will not be the same design of window packaging that we had at the very start of the line. While that's understandable, it's yet another example of Hasbro ignoring the feedback that their audience has given them. Fans who display their collection have complained since plastic-free packaging first debuted that their collection is not all the same size, making it more difficult to arrange their collection chronologically or in a way where the boxes are not different sizes or styles. Now we have confirmation from Emily that a brand new style of packaging will be introduced in spring 2024. Lenny mentioned that he wants different styles of Cobra bats for every situation, and that the Arctic bat joining Classified is just the tip of the iceberg. There will be even more iterations of bats to follow the Arctic bat, so let your imaginations run wild out there. The Hasbro team was asked if UK distribution can be expected to improve in the near future. As we've covered extensively, UK collectors have gotten the shaft when it comes to exclusive figures in the G.I. Joe Classified series. There's been one problem after another. In particular, the Dr. Mindbender Mindbender and Serpentor exclusives were almost impossible to order if you live in the UK or Europe. They were only made available in the most limited quantities. If you live in Europe or Australia, it's even worse. Emily and Lenny took this as an opportunity to poorly attempt some damage control and even tried to rewrite history once again to deny any wrongdoing and present themselves as the heroes in the situation. But that's not happening under our watch, especially since the issues that the UK collectors have been complaining about have still gone unresolved. Hasbro's team should be more focused on fixing the current problems than trying to escape blame for the problems happening in the first place. Emily said, Serpentor and Mindbender were rare cases for us. They were convention exclusive items that were ultimately so wildly successful, we opened them up for another order. But what that meant is we had to do a rerun on them. So depending on when you placed your order, you were either in the first batch or the second batch, and there were large time gaps between them. Let's pause once again. We have to fact check what Emily and Lenny have said. Here on Viper Island, we've documented the long list of outstanding issues with the distribution of both Dr. Mindbender and Serpentor in the UK, Europe, and around the world. Hasbro intentionally produced a limited run of figures for both Mindbender and Serpentor. That's both a fact and undeniable, and this is despite the fact that both characters are hugely popular, key characters, and they were the two biggest exclusives of the line for 2022 releases. There was no excuse to not know. After all, G.I. Joe the movie centers all around Serpentor. Hasbro knew. Hasbro intentionally created artificial demand by restricting the supply of both of these figures. We called them out immediately. We had special reports devoted to putting pressure on Hasbro to do the right thing and extend further production runs of both of these exclusives. Ultimately, they did, but only because they were forced to submit to the pressure of the fanbase. But on the flip side, let's take what they're saying at face value. If Hasbro were to do a very limited run of General Hawk like they originally did with Mindbender and Serpentor, and with Hawk being one of the main Joe characters and faces of the brand, we already know that it would sell out instantly and create another situation in which supply was throttled so much that demand would be absurdly high. This is what happened with Mindbender and Serpentor. There's no way to excuse it. This was a direct manipulation of the product availability, which creates a lopsided amount of demand. Hasbro could have ordered as many Mindbender and Serpentor figures as they wanted. After all, they're the vendors. They place the orders, not the customers. They intentionally restricted the production numbers in order to inflate demand and try to appear as heroes who saved the day by announcing another production run. This after telling us that there would never be another production run of Mindbender or Serpentor. Emily said no promises on there being a second run of production for Serpentor, but the good news is, she said they love how much everyone wants G.I. Joe products. For Emily or Lenny to continue to try to rewrite the narrative of this line's problems and attempt to erase their mistakes and cover them up, or in some cases outright lie about it, it's unnecessary and another example of how the brand lacks transparency. Let's not forget, they did not willingly do another production run for both Mindbender or Serpentor. During multiple live streams last year, Emily specifically went out of her way to tell us that there would not be a second production run for either character. Now they're trying to spin this and say that the characters were so wildly successful that they had to do a rerun on them. So never forget the power of numbers in these situations. We're now around 17,000 strong on Viper Island here on YouTube and over 20,000 combined with our social media accounts. As time passes, many will likely forget that Hasbro tried to move on from Mindbender and Serpentor after the first run sold out immediately and left thousands of fans empty-handed. They tried to move on. They tried to ignore the community. We literally had to produce special reports specifically about this issue in order to force Hasbro into listening to the fan base and force their hand on another production run. When this Joe team is doing interviews and being asked about topics they don't want to talk about, always take their constantly changing story with a grain of salt. On the topic of quality control issues such as Falcon, Zorana's arms, CoverGirl's arms, and many other issues with recent waves, Lenny said, "We are aware of the issues and we are addressing them. It's trade secret, so we can't talk about it. Transparent as the day is long. There's definitely a way to answer this question without entirely avoiding it. Anything they don't want to talk about, they always seem to hide behind a convenient get-out-of-responsibility card and claim that they just can't talk about it. So to anyone who's open to Tiger Force Outback or CoverGirl and discovered that your figure already has a broken limb or any of the other issues we mentioned, don't bother asking Hasbro about it. According to them, they can't talk about it. When it comes to choosing which figures receive specific tooling or accessories, Lenny said, "We do try to keep tooling in mind when we make specific parts, but then we'll make new parts to make a new character. There's planning involved where I stir the cauldron with all the money involved and see where the money's going to fall, then try to push and pull, and maybe see where we can update a character or drop a character for something else that can help the full year, because a lot of that comes into play too, where we've had characters in the hopper ready to to go, like yes, this is going to be sick, and then we've had to cancel it 2 years in a row because it's not going to help the overall, but you have to think of the greater good sometimes. This is an interesting comment from Lenny about having to cancel a costly figure 2 years in a row. Who do you think this might be? Drop your own ideas down in the comments of which character you think had to be dropped from the line because it was too expensive for their budget and didn't fit in with the rest of the line just yet. In terms of creating a more deluxe or premium version of G.I. Joe Classified, Tony said, "We're already cramming quite a bit of stuff in these packages. Maybe upgrading materials would work. There's one thing that Hasbro pushes and repeats in our brains almost daily: innovation. How do you take it to the next step? Maybe it is premium. Maybe it is a scale change. It's constant pressure from Hasbro to innovate, which is great because it keeps it fresh." Then let's move on to the O-Ring line. In regards to the O-Ring line, which Hasbro appears to have misled fans about in order to pump up Sky Striker HasLab sales, Emily said, "No comments on that at this time. We're still needing to understand what's happening with that line." Lenny added, "A lot of the decision making is the funds that we have and the tooling library that we're creating. Where do you hedge your bet essentially? It's pushing and pulling. One of those has got to give. When? How? Where are the funds? And then paying attention to the data from our sales team and marketing team." With this comment right here, Lenny appears to be saying that it's one or the other, Classified or the O-Ring line, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Tony added about the O-Ring line, "It's something that's celebrated in the lore, and something that's always in conversation. We can't talk about future plans, but it's always in the conversation. As for the His Tank HasLab, and whether the success of that campaign has made it easier for the Joe team to propose new ideas, Lenny said, "It has made it easier to sell them on ideas, because the business is to dive into a world of play. As a designer, that gets me excited. The best way to create a world of play with G.I. Joe is with vehicles, so it definitely is easier to sell them. When we sold through the Sky Striker, Hasbro said the Classified line is doing well, how can we support Classified? And so we said, His Tank. It's kind of like G.I. Joe's version of a Star Wars TIE Fighter. It's a very iconic vehicle to the brand. It opened up the avenue to get into that stuff." We want your takes down in the comments section. Let us know in the comments if you want members of the October Guard to join Classified. And be sure to tell us in the comments if you agree with us that Big Bear or Red Star would be a natural fit as a new Joe character and as a part of Night Force. There you have it, folks, all the G.I. Joe news and rumors you need to know. Also be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to stay up to date on all of our episodes, and we'll see you next time back for more G.I. Joe coverage right here on the notorious Viper Island.